This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome into the Practice Squad presents the Throwback, going through the 2013 season right now. Today it's a loss to the Bengals 27-24 at home, followed by a very memorable win 31-30. And Stroz, before we get into it, I want to bring something up. I realized while watching these, things are going to get weird here in a moment because the NFL season starts in a week and a half. Are we going to be doing a rewatch while watching 2020?
I mean, I think we're going to have to, right? Like, we can't just put this on pause, can we?
I think we finished 2013, and then do we maybe pause there until 2014?
We might have to. I think we'll have to kind of gauge it.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. But I had that thought today. Like, wait a second. We've just been going about doing this, watching our football, talking about football. And today's the first time I realized we're going to be finishing a rewatch of 2013 during the 2020 actual season.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I started watching the Bengals game the other day. And I was like, this is going to be weird. There's going to be a lot of football for us to digest watching the 2013 season and then juxtaposing that to what we've got here in 2020. So I was like, I wonder what B's going to want to do here. So I'm glad you brought it up. It was like on the back of my mind.
My current thought is that we finish this season and then take a break until after the season. We have to do 2014. Whenever we do it, we have to do it. So we'll see. I just wanted to bring that up. I told you before we started recording, this Dallas game, in fact, Stroz, I don't know where you stand. The second game we're going to do today is maybe the most excited I've been to do any game since we started this podcast. Only exception maybe being the playoff game in 2011.
It was such a
maybe
weird
Monday Night
game.
Football too.
Like I remember that game, and I remember the game-winning drive, and it was weird. I ended up looking at the box score before this game. Normally we talk about looking at the box score after the game. For this Cowboys game, I looked at it before, and I was blown away by Calvin Johnson's performance. But then I was like, you don't remember Calvin Johnson's performance in this game. You remember Matt Stafford. And it was like one play by Matt Stafford. I
actually saw it scrolling across Reddit this morning. It's funny. It happened to be on Reddit, the front page, or not front page, but towards the top of NFL, it was like the best game of Calvin Johnson's career. And I saw that, and I was like, I do remember that. Because if you don't remember, and we're already jumping into Dallas, that tells you how this one's going to go. The reason I brought it up is because I just watched the Bengals game yesterday, and I don't remember watching it. Thankfully, I take notes, so I have some of those. But I was so ready for this Cowboys game, I think that's going to be the focus of this episode. But if you don't remember, Des Bryant kind of talked crap before that game. Or somebody on the Cowboys did. I believe it was Des Bryant, said he was better than Calvin.
Oh, that's why. So during it, I watched the condensed version, but they ended up cutting off part of what one of the announcers were saying about Des Bryant compared to Calvin Johnson. That's interesting. I don't remember him talking junk. I mean, I think at the time it probably was probably a hot topic, but I don't remember it rewatching this game. But that's funny you bring that up because there was a point in the game early in the first quarter where the announcers had referenced Des Bryant saying something, and it had to do with Calvin Johnson. So that makes total sense to me.
Too deep into that game yet, but that game is not even the game. The final drive of that game is
nuts.
It's probably a top 3, top 5 Lions memory of my life. It might be number 1. I'd have to really think about it. But into the Bengals game, talk about a game they shouldn't have lost. I'm going to jump right to the end for a second. This game stayed very close throughout, but at the end of the day, they ended up losing this game because of a punt. It's really that simple. Sam Martin had a few of these in his career, but he basically had a 10-yard punt, 20-yard punt with 30 seconds left in the game in a tie game. Literally all he has to do is not blow that punt and they go into overtime. And who knows what happens when you get to overtime. But I thought pretty clearly the Lions were the better one in this game, in this one. And that pretty much ended it. When you gave it back to the Bengals, they only needed to go 15, 20 yards to get a field goal. Made it pretty easy.
You know, it's funny you say that because when this game starts, my very first note is Sam Martin has a leg on him. So this was kind of one of those games where Sam Martin had basically two sides to him because he ends up booming a punt that I think went like 60-some yards. And then he has a punt that cost them the game where it goes off the side of his foot and it only goes 10, maybe 20 yards. And then next thing you know, Cincinnati comes down, runs 4 straight plays, picks up a couple yards, and then they kick a field goal to win this game. But this is definitely a game that the Lions should have won, and they ended up losing it.
Well, he was a rookie this season, and it was very clear in his rookie season that he was a very damn good punter. He had probably 2 or 3 major shanks in his career that cost them. He did in this one. But on average, very, very good punter. We don't normally jump to the end, but I literally in my notes wrote LOL lost on a punt.
A couple of things I took out of this game. So the big moment that everybody remembers, obviously, the Calvin Johnson catch. He goes up between 3 guys and hauls in this miraculous grab. So this was the rewind for me in this game. So Stafford rolls out, pockets collapsing around him, rolls out. He's stepping up into what was the pocket, and he has a guy coming from behind him. Just as he lets the ball go, he gets clobbered. And you've got Calvin Johnson downfield, jumps up between 3 defenders and hauls this pass in for a touchdown. That's the play everybody remembers. What I don't think gets enough credit, or what people talk about enough, is the piss poor job that Chris Houston did in this game. Chris Houston gets burned by A.J. Green. Chris Houston gets burned by Marvin Jones. Chris Houston was torched this entire game.
So the rewind moment's the same for me as well. It's the best catch of Calvin Johnson's career. And honestly, it's probably one of the best catches in NFL history. It was genuine triple coverage. This wasn't 3 guys in the area. This was 4 guys going up for the ball, one of them wearing blue and him being the one who came down with it. As far as Chris Houston, that's actually where I was about to go before you jumped in. I think it's become very clear 7 games, but also I didn't think he was very good against Dallas either. 8 games into this season, Chris Houston doesn't have it anymore.
Something with the Dallas game. There's something with the Dallas game that when we get to it, I want to highlight it and point it out to you because I'm not sure if you noticed it. But go on. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I just thought in general, it's become very clear Chris Houston doesn't have it anymore. And that's a problem because the cornerback depth was an issue on this team already. Darius Slay, obviously, we know what he goes on to become, but rookie season has his struggles. I think Rasheed Mathis is on this team, but he doesn't stand out. Louis Delmas, there's things I loved about him, but not great in pass coverage. But Chris Houston's just not the guy he was in 2011 anymore, and it was very obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something else that was big in this game, it was the inability to really set up and establish the run. I think the offensive line struggled through much of this game. I don't think they did Matt Stafford any help at all. And I think that also kicked over to Reggie Bush. I think Reggie Bush struggled to get his game going on the ground in this game. Now, Reggie Bush was effective with some of the short dump-offs and some of the quick passes, but really trying to run the ball, I thought Reggie Bush struggled. I thought Joique Bell was a little bit more consistent than Reggie Bush was. And whether that was just the blocking or whether it's just because he's a little bit of a bigger back and he's able to power through, I thought Joique Bell was a little bit better on the ground than Reggie Bush was in this game. I'm not sure if you noticed that.
So I want to say this. I didn't necessarily notice this until now as we talk about it. I think these 2 games probably have the most consistent theme of any 2 games we've watched in one sitting since we started this podcast. One of the things that I think became very clear in both games was this Lions offense, it should have been so easy to predict that the Lions were going to be so much better the following season. I mean, some of that's the defense and how good the defense gets, but the offense is predictable in that you can tell when it's going to do well and when it's going to struggle. And it all comes down to, do they have a second weapon? In the games where their second weapon gets going, the offense plays well. In games where their second weapon struggles or doesn't exist, the offense is useless. In this game, Reggie Bush struggled, and for that reason, the offense struggled. In the next game, Reggie Bush struggles early, and the offense struggles early. I thought when Reggie Bush started getting it going, the offense started getting it going. We'll get deeper into that, obviously, but my point is, this offense was so dependent on a second weapon. And in 2014, they bring in Golden Tate, who's the most reliable second weapon in recent Lions memory. Now, the offensive line, I've said so many times, and I think I've said it on every episode this season, my memories of the Lions offensive line in this era was that they were horrible, that they were brutal, useless. And that had not been a reality. They had bad games, but as a whole, the offensive line, I thought through 2011 and 2012, was actually pretty average. Watching 2013, halfway through the season, it is very clear to me, this is where the memories of a bad offensive line come from. I'm so sick and tired of seeing Stafford on his ass because it's happening 10 times in every game. And Reggie Bush only makes plays happen when he can make a couple guys miss and get to the outside. This offensive line was so brutal. And some of that, I'm sure, was Riley Reid taking over. They also mentioned, I don't know if it was in this game or the next game, there was an injury at right tackle as well. And I believe, no, Dominic Arola didn't retire quite yet. But this offensive line was just, it's useless.
Yeah, and look, like going back to Reggie Bush, his longest run in this game was for 7 yards. And he probably had to run 18 yards to pick up 7 because he had to cut back. There were times where he was running backwards trying to elude defenders only to scamper forward to pick up 3 yards. He just ran back 5 trying to make a guy miss. And then he cut side to side a few times to fall forward for 3. The offensive line was absolutely piss poor in this game. It seems like any time that they go up against a remotely average to above average defensive line, they just get their shit pushed in and they just get it handed to you.
See, I don't agree with that. I think, like, in saying that, what you're saying, like, I think you're almost blending 2011 through 2013 too much, because in 2011 and 12, that was the case. They were an average offensive line. There were games where they looked good, and there were games where they looked useless. In 2013, I think the offensive line has looked bad consistently. Like, we're 8 games in, and there's probably been 6 bad games with the offensive line. I think the offensive line has been in contention for the dud of the game. I'm trying to look right now and see how many times I've given it to them. Coming into these 2 games, I had only given it to them 3 times, but I think they were in contention. And I don't think that this offensive line only looks bad against good defensive lines. I think they look bad all the time. This offensive line was a problem. And, you know, I never wrote it down, but I thought it while watching this game. I wanted to ask you, as someone who's had Stafford complaints, fair or unfair, but I'm saying whether or not they were fair complaints, can you watch this and feel what I feel? Because what I feel is, it's not even like a you were wrong, but I don't understand how Stafford could have done more. This man lives on his back this season. Like, it makes me angry. That's what I wanted to ask you. Do you watch this and see what Stafford's dealt with and get angry? Because I do. I think it's honestly ridiculous what your quarterback has been asked to do for the majority of his career.
I wouldn't say I get angry, but what I will say is I have in the past come off as a Stafford basher. And that if you were to say that's totally fair, and I would feel that's totally accurate. What I will say is I have a newfound appreciation for Matt Stafford and what he has done. That being said, there are times where I think Matt Stafford puts his receivers in bad spots. There are times where I think Matt Stafford tries to force the ball a little bit. There are times when Matt Stafford makes
I was
mistakes.
getting murdered every time I do them.
But all of that being said, Matt Stafford has to do a ton for this team. I think if you had a lesser quarterback, this team would be in dire straits because Matt Stafford has time in and time out picked this team up and he has helped carry them. And that is coming from a guy who when you first met me and you would go back and forth on Matt Stafford all the time. So I have a newfound appreciation for Matt Stafford and what he was able to do. And especially watching it back, I'm like, the player he grows into being is absolutely amazing. And that being said, I think he's very, very good right here in 2003. And he has a bad offensive line in front of him.
Do you have anything else you need to get to before studs and duds?
No.
So I want to stay there. And by the way, I have a Stafford question for you in the next game too. But I want to stay on Stafford. I'm actually going to give him my stud award. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't have him as my stud watching the game. Sometimes I come into the podcast with a stud ready. Sometimes I look at the numbers and something jumps out. I thought Stafford looked relatively poor. I also was, again, angry watching it at how much time he spent on his back. Then you look at the numbers and you go, holy crap, how did he manage this? He went 28 for 51 for 360 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. I'm sorry, what? Like, the game I watched looked nothing like that. And I don't think you can fluke your way to those kind of numbers.
No, I think you're right when you say that, because I was looking at the stats too, and I was blown away by what he did, because I just got done watching this game and I was like, that doesn't seem right. Like, that seems more accurate for the game we're about to talk about, but that doesn't really seem right for this game that I just watched, which was weird to me. I have no problem with you giving it to Matt Stafford.
Kevin had 50 yards. Chris Durham had 40 yards. I mean, a whole bunch of people with a couple catches. Fourier had a couple. Broyles had a couple. Calvin had a good game, 15 for 155 and 2 touchdowns. But the 360 yards happened through the whole team.
Yeah, he spread the ball around to 8 different guys. But look, I don't have a problem with Matt Stafford as the stud. He was probably the other guy that I would make the argument should be the stud of this game. But I'm going to give it to Calvin Johnson. You already read his stat line. I thought Calvin Johnson came up huge in this game. It really wasn't his fault that they ended up losing this game. I mean, this game is remembered for one thing and one thing alone, and that was for his theatrics, and it was for his play. All that being said, Matt Stafford was on the other end of that play, and Matt Stafford had a gutsy-ass performance. So I don't have a problem with where your stud is. I think the only other logical stud would be Calvin Johnson.
My dud, no one came close. The offensive line was useless. Matthew Stafford lived on his back. Reggie Bush couldn't run the ball. Joique Bell, you said you thought Joique Bell had a better game running the ball. Understand that he rushed for 27 yards. Mm-hmm. The offensive line in this game was useless.
Absolutely. Offensive line was absolutely trash. I'm going to go with Chris Houston. He got filleted by Cincinnati receivers. I mean, Marvin Jones ends up coming to Detroit, and I think Marvin Jones is a pretty good player. Marvin Jones was very young at this time. I think he was a rookie here. And Marvin Jones is taking it to Chris Houston. A.J. Green will go down in the Hall of Fame. A.J. Green absolutely torches Chris Houston and blows right by him.
Just
Chris
so you know,
Houston
Marvin
needs
Jones
to get a
had
vest
700 yards and 10 touchdowns this season.
He was pretty good. He was a rookie this season, wasn't he? Second year. Okay. So, I mean, he was a pretty good wide receiver. Not quite where he's at now, but really he was on the cusp. He really benefited from playing alongside AJ Green. I think AJ Green would always get double coverage. He would get that single coverage, and he's a fast guy who can stretch the field.
So, I mean, I told you I dislike Chris Houston in this game. I honestly, because I think this is the second time we've done this, where I thought the offensive line was a no-brainer, and you went Chris Houston. Mm-hmm. The one thing I want to say, I genuinely believe that there's something you're missing to give it to Chris Houston over the offensive line 2 games in a row. I don't know if it's because, you view the Lions offensive line as being a problem, because there's no doubt we're less likely to give stud to Calvin because of what he was. I don't know if you're doing that with the offensive line or what's going on, but, I thought Chris Houston was bad in this one, but I just thought he was outmatched. I don't think Chris Houston belonged guarding A.J. Green on plays where he got burnt. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure he really belonged guarding Marvin Jones. I was much higher on Marvin Jones than you were when he came in, and at this point in his career, I think Marvin Jones was, by year 2, was one of the better wide receiver 2s in the league. And Chris Houston, the thing is, in a lot of these plays, and on Marvin Jones' touchdown, Chris Houston was there. It's not like Chris Houston was nowhere to be found. He just wasn't winning a battle for the ball against Marvin Jones or A.J. Green. So I'm trying to look at this season through the scope of what you were when this season started and what you're becoming as the season evolves. Chris Houston is your best cornerback. Going into the year, Chris Houston was your best cornerback. He was the guy who wasn't good last year either.
But that being said, he's your best cornerback. On this team, he's your best cornerback. Fair or unfair? You don't know what you have with Darius Slay yet.
You probably thought he was. I don't know if it actually ends up playing out that way, to be honest with you. Their cornerbacks are brutal. I don't think there's nothing to be happy about with their cornerbacks.
I think their cornerbacks are better this year than they were last year. Last year, they were absolutely abysmal. This year, I think they are better. Absolutely.
Rasheed Mathis is better.
Rasheed Mathis is better. I think Darius Slay gives a boost to that core. I think Chris Houston has taken multiple steps back. And look, he had no answer for the AJ Green touchdown. He was in position for the Marvin Jones touchdown. He, like you said, he just didn't win the battle. So I mean, there's 2 sides to this story here. He's just not very good.
All right, going into the Dallas Cowboys game, the Lions win 31-30 at home. I haven't had many of these episodes, and I didn't even realize the extent to which it was this episode. But this is going to be a Stafford love episode for me. I think I've kept it to 1 or 2 per rewatch season. But I've got a lot to say about Matthew Stafford in this one. First, we should probably mention, like you said, Calvin Johnson, 14 receptions, 329 yards, and a touchdown. And you probably don't remember that about this game. That being said, watching it, I don't think it was obvious either. Watching it back a second time, I was trying to keep track of how he got to 329 yards. I think it was deceptive because of his 87-yard catch, which was basically a 15-yard catch and 62-yard run. Nothing to say about that.
Oh, I wasn't sure. I thought you were looking something up, so I thought you had more. No. I'll edit that up. Don't worry about it. No, yeah. That run was absolutely crazy. In my notes, I've got Kelvin running away from 4 defenders is a thing of beauty. His long legs, him striding away from all of these guys. I just felt bad for him because I felt like he got tired right there at the 3-yard line, and then he got pushed out of bounds.
It was very clear that he was faster than anyone chasing him. It was actually kind of surprising that he tired like that. I mean, it was an 87-yard run. I guess wide receivers aren't doing that all that often, at least not running away from guys after the catch. But every once in a while, a couple times a season, you get a play from Calvin that reminds you, oh, wait, this dude was stupid fast. But I'm going to jump right over to Stafford now.
Okay.
Something Stafford...
Should we get the lotion for you?
Sure. Something Stafford gets a lot of criticism for in his career, and I think fairly so, but you have to understand the context, is he misses on open deep balls. I think you would agree with that, right?
Yes.
And I think it's a fair criticism, but the context I've tried to provide for literally his entire career is that we get so used to watching Peyton Manning and Patrick Mahomes on primetime TV that we forget that if you aren't a top 2 or 3, like if you're not in the current league, you're talking like Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if there's another one. Guys who have been that guy, Aaron Rodgers, probably Tom Brady for a portion of his career, maybe Russell Wilson. If you're not one of the truly top couple guys, anything beyond 30 plus yards, guys miss those. And the reason that I bring that up, Tony Romo missed at least 3 or 4 wide open deep balls in this game. And you're not missing by miles, but you're talking, when you start talking about 40, 50 yards in the air, those throws don't get hit consistently by anyone in the league. It's like, again, it's Patrick Mahomes and Peyton Manning type of guys. Stafford and Romo type of guys, they're allowed to miss those because every other damn quarterback in the league does. So this wasn't so much of a Stafford, like what Stafford did in this game, but I just watched Romo miss a bunch of deep balls and went like, I think Romo's actually a really good comparison for where Stafford is in the league. And he was missing all sorts of those.
He did miss quite a few. I think the thing that I took out of what Dallas's offense was doing, and this goes back to our last game, they were targeting Chris Houston. They found something when watching video with Terrence Williams lining up on Chris Houston, and they went after Terrence Williams and Chris Houston. They went to that battle time in and time out. I mean, Terrence Williams had 10 targets. He was the most targeted wide receiver in this game. Absolutely crazy. The only thing is he only caught 2, and I think 2 of those catches he caught against Darius Slay. Darius Slay did not have a very good game in this game. He got burned by Des Bryant, who the Lions were lining up on their number 1 receiver, Des Bryant, with Darius Slay, and then he got burned by Terrence Williams for a long touchdown as well. But the Dallas Cowboys seen something on film with Chris Houston and decided to try to go and cherry pick that. Didn't really work out in their favor, but no, you're right. He did miss a couple deep balls down the field.
I didn't notice, because you asked, you were curious if I noticed. I did not notice them specifically targeting Chris Houston. I also, though, I mean, the theme of this season, and honestly, I think the Cowboys, if that's what they keyed in on, I think they made a mistake. I don't think there was any need to key in on anything. Throughout this season, the one way that the Lions have gotten beat on defense consistently is just somebody's going to get open. Whether it's Des Bryant, Terrence Williams, I got to be honest with you, James Hanna was a name that I kept seeing. He only had 2 catches. I don't know who the hell that is. I don't remember him. But just consistently, if a quarterback has time, somebody's going to get open. Romo's numbers in this game, hella pedestrian, 14 of 30 for 206 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think that the 3 touchdowns number, like, something we need to talk about for sure. What the hell was going on with the turnovers in this game?
Dude, the Lions were like trying to give this game away. It was crazy.
I'm not even talking about the volume of turnovers. I'm talking about like the first turnover bounces off of, I believe it's Calvin, but whatever receiver it is. Mm-hmm. It hits the receiver and then it's caught by Sean Lee. The second interception is a genuine interception. Stafford didn't see Sean Lee cutting underneath the receiver. Sean Lee picks it off. Then Reggie Bush's fumble, like he didn't, but it literally looked like he like spiked the ball. The ball just like slammed off the ground and started bouncing in the air.
It looked like he was getting forced out of bounds, and he like threw the ball back in bounds, but like threw it at the ground, and it like bounced up, and the Cowboys got it, and then they took it back down the field.
And then Calvin had a wild fumble too. Yeah. It was just like 3 of the 4 turnovers seemed fluky as hell.
The weird thing was all the turnovers came from the guys that you normally count on. So like Matt Stafford, one of your studs. Calvin Johnson, your stud. Reggie Bush, your other stud. Like, these are the guys who are turning the ball over.
So, studs, yes. Calvin Johnson absolutely has a history of fumbling the ball. Probably the biggest knock. I mean, he had 14 fumbles in his career. I don't know how that stacks up, but as a wide receiver, like, he had 3 seasons with 3 fumbles. I don't think you're going to find a ton of those at wide receiver. At running back, sure. But at wide receiver, I don't think that's very common. Fun note, though. Did you see after the game they flashed the Lions were only the second team in NFL history to win a game with a -4 turnover differential?
Yeah, I seen that. There's some trivia for you.
That's honestly incredible that that's only happened twice. You know what, though? It felt like the Lions were overwhelmingly the better team in this game, aside from a -4 turnover differential.
I thought the defense did a great job. And this is something that we've seen a little bit this year. Third down rolls around. I think the defense tightens up and plays really, really good. I think Dallas gets some of their points because of these turnovers and where the ball gets turned over at. So I think Dallas just takes advantage of that. That's the only reason that they're in this game.
I mean, they were outgained. The Lions outgained the Cowboys in this game 623 to 268 and won by
3-1.
That's incredible. There can't be many games with that sort of margin that end this close. Super, super, super small note. Did you notice a change at kick returner?
Yes, I did.
Jeremy Ross takes over in this game, will be the guy the rest of the way. Had a 44-yard return in this game. I don't really know why. I think it's just because of Stephon Logan. We'll always pay attention to kick returners the rest of this podcast.
He has scarred us.
But I had to point that out because I mentioned that was like Michael Spurlock sucked too, but the difference was Michael Spurlock didn't keep his job. I don't have anything else before we get to the last drive. Do you?
So, that's where I wanted to go. I was hoping you were going there next.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we got to talk about the last drive. So I mentioned this. I left this game with my family, me, my dad, and my brother. We left this game. It was when the Lions gave the ball back with about a minute and a half left. And I got to be honest with you. I've watched the game-winning drive many times. I have not watched the possession before it. This is the first time I saw the reason they got the ball back with a minute and not just 20 seconds was because of a holding penalty they were able to decline. So admittedly, that's massive. That being said, the way things played out, the Lions really, I mean, I'm not saying they would have scored with only 20 seconds, but holy crap, there's just so many layers to what makes the game-winning drive incredible. For one, it really only took about 40 seconds with no timeouts. Two, my replay moment of the game, the 40-yard throw to Chris Durham on the sideline is probably a top 5 throw of Matthew Stafford's career. You have to understand that with no timeouts, needing a touchdown, and needing to move the ball 70 yards, there's probably not a single throw the defense wants to give you less than 40 yards and out of bounds. And there are 3 defenders in the area. It's not quite the true triple coverage Calvin had in the game earlier, but 3 defenders in the area, and Matthew Stafford fits it 40 yards down the field, right into Chris Durham's hands as he's going out of bounds to stop the clock. Without that play, this comeback doesn't have a chance.
No, you're right. So, like, the final drive, I was just blown away by, because Matt Stafford's absolutely perfect on it. And you're right, the pass to Chris Durham is so money. And he fits it into a nice tight window, and Chris Durham's able to get out of bounds. This team was so efficient on this final drive, it blew me away. They had to go 80 yards. They had 62 seconds to do it. And you're right, they only used about 40 of those. It was absolutely crazy. Had 0 timeouts. And then there's that pass to Calvin that is down the field, and he gets knocked down at the 1 yard line, which sets up the game-winning score by Matt Stafford. This game was awesome, man. This drive was just absolutely incredible. It's amazing because when we talk about this game, Calvin Johnson had arguably his best game of his career here, but we don't remember that. You remember what Matt Stafford did. And Matt Stafford's touchdown was, I don't want to say it was awe-inspiring, but this whole drive gave me chills.
It was literally awe-inspiring. The man was calling for, you got to understand, like, again, the layers of what makes this incredible. He's calling for a spike. His team thinks he's going to spike it. He makes the judgment call, and he has said this. When he was calling for a spike, he did not necessarily know that he was going to go for it. He made the snap judgment call when he saw the way the defense lined up that, no, I'm not going to spike this. I'm going to take it to the end zone. And if he fails to get in, the game is over. They snap the ball with 12 seconds left. He's not getting back to the line of scrimmage and spiking the ball again in that amount of time. It's just not happening. So he put the entire game on the line in a snap second. That's incredible. And it's where, like, it pisses me off. There are fair criticisms of Stafford. And I think sometimes people give those fair criticisms and they still don't add up to Stafford is the problem, but somehow they get themselves there. But one criticism of Stafford that I will never accept is that he's not a leader. He's not a winner. What the hell is a winner? If Aaron Rodgers does that, if Tom Brady does that, if Peyton Manning does that, if Patrick Mahomes does that, if any elite quarterback ever does that in Detroit, you look at that moment and say, that's what I want Matthew Stafford to be. And to be fair, I think the majority of us look at that moment and say that's who Matthew Stafford is. But if you look at that moment and think that Matthew Stafford, like that was just one great moment in his career, it's probably the second best to the Cleveland touchdown. But I mean, this whole drive, to me, it's like who Matthew Stafford is as a quarterback.
It was super impressive. I mean, it was amazing to watch it. And it was one of those things where I know how the game ended, right? So when they got the ball back for that final drive, I was so honed in on it. And I had like tally marks to keep track of if he was perfect or not. Because I was like, you only have 62 seconds. You have to be unbelievably perfect in this game. And you have zero timeouts.
That's your own play.
Exactly. Like every play on this drive, you needed it. It took everything for it to work. And it was a miracle. It was awesome. It was great to watch. Like I said, it gave me goosebumps. How many times can you say watching a play gives you goosebumps?
I remember the exact moment. When I hit the 6:25 moment, it became very hard to watch. I looked at the clock and it was like, we're so close. We're so close to one of the most exciting moments in my Lions history. Like, I just want to get there. I want to fast forward. Anything else in that drive before we get to studs and duds?
No.
What's your stud?
It's got to be Stafford, right? Has to be Stafford.
So it's fun.
He was perfect on that drive.
So he was perfect in that drive. They don't win the game without the drive. And we've done a really good job of this without planning it this season. I have to give it to Calvin Johnson.
Ah, interesting. I was wondering if you were going to go Calvin.
I mean, this game is a game that you have to remember Calvin or Matthew Stafford for in that final drive. But I think this speaks to more along the lines of the way I look at football, right? Like, you had to get to this point. And you got to this point because Calvin Johnson was a monster all game long. He had an 87-yard play that led to your first touchdown. He got you to the 1-yard line on that catch right before Stafford takes it into the end zone. He was the only thing. Let's put it this way, Stroz. Calvin Johnson single-handedly outgained the Dallas Cowboys. And he didn't do it by like 5 yards. He did it by more than 50.
Did it by 100 and...
No.
Nope. You're right. Nope. You're right. He did it by like 70.
So, I mean, 70 yards. And so as incredible as that last drive was for Matthew Stafford, I'm not a believer that one moment is what determines the game. You don't get here. You don't have a chance at that moment if Calvin Johnson doesn't keep you in this game offensively.
Matt Stafford had a really efficient game, especially for Matt Stafford's standards.
Oh, I mean, Stafford was incredible,
33
too.
of 48. He had almost 500 yards, 488 yards. The 2 interceptions really hurt. And
one was a fluke.
Having...
I can't blame him for the first one. The second one was all him.
And then he had the one touchdown, the rushing touchdown.
Oh, I forgot to ask you my Matthew Stafford question. Very important question here. And this isn't me trying to make some of it's me trying to make a point, but a lot of it's genuine curiosity. Currently, today, in 2020, how many quarterbacks in the league do you think have thrown, not completed, thrown more off-balance passes than Matthew Stafford?
Interesting question.
Wilson, maybe Aaron Rodgers.
I would say those two. I would say Ben Roethlisberger.
So I wondered about Ben Roethlisberger, but I'm not sure if I agree with that.
See, you have to remember too. Early in Ben's career, Ben would hold on to the ball forever, and then he'd usually have a guy hanging on him as he was making a pass. That's part of the reason why he's so banged up.
I'm okay with that claim.
And then I really don't know after that. That's a good question.
And to be honest with you, I think he probably competes with every single one of them. I don't think it's wildly outplaced. He only got sacked one time in this one. When I specifically thought of that question, right before he threw his second interception, which again was on him, he leaning backwards, sidearms the throw to Brandon Pettigrew. That Brandon Pettigrew has to jump to catch. And that's one where you go, he puts his guys in bad situations. And I'm thinking like Matthew Stafford's matrixing while throwing a 17-yard pass to Brandon Pettigrew. And it's a complete pass.
He's processing the ones and zeros.
And when I saw that throw, I was just like, how many times has he done this in his career? Complete or incomplete? How many times has he had to like step away just so he can get murdered a half second later? Who's your dud?
My dud is Darius Slay. So I fried Chris Houston on our last game. Darius Slay was chewed up and spit out in this game. This is one of those games where when everybody talks about how Darius Slay played in his rookie season, this is one of those games that they point to. He was burned by Des Bryant, and he was burned by Terrence Williams. And there were a couple other plays in this game where he just looked a little bit off balance. Darius Slay did not have a very good game here.
My dud is going to be whatever ball boy forgot to sandpaper the football. I've never seen a football team with 3 fluky turnovers like that. Like, I genuinely don't believe. I've had games where I've criticized the Lions for holding on to the football. And maybe they deserved it in this one. But Reggie's fumble, Calvin's fumble, and one of Matthew Stafford's interceptions were just wild. Like, I've never seen the ball bounce so hard off the ground on a fumble. Like, the power of the ball as it hit the ground looked like he threw the ball off the ground. Honestly, that's kind of a cop-out answer, but I didn't have a great dud in this game. Like you said, I thought the defense overall played pretty well. Stafford only got sacked once, so I can't complain. Reggie struggled early, but he really got it going late. So I'm gonna stick to it. The ball boy who didn't sandpaper the ball.
I like it. That is, I don't know if a ball boy's ever been considered for the dud.
I've had some very unique ones. I did give Matt Castle the stud of the game in week 1 of 2011.
You did.
But I couldn't come up with a player. It's funny because I only won by 1, and I needed to tie it into the fumbles or the turnovers as a whole. But it was just unique. I can't recall watching plays like those.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, it was pretty. Like, the Reggie Bush fumble was probably the most crazy thing I've ever seen because, like, all of a sudden the ball just squirts out from his body, and it's like it falls between him and then 2 Cowboy defenders, and it's just like laying there on the turf after it bounces. So you're right. The fumble situation was absolutely nuts in this game. All
right, next week we're gonna do something that we did a lot of last year. We're gonna watch 2 losses. The Lions head to Pittsburgh, lose 37-27. Lose a close one at home against Tampa Bay, 24-21. Those will be the 2 losses next week before the last win of the season.
Next week.
Chicago. Oh, so we get a win next season.
We get a win next week, yeah.
We don't have to do very many double dips of losses.
No, just at the very end of the season we do.
Good catch. So it's at Chicago they win 21-19 in a close one before going to Pittsburgh, 37-27 loss. I'm thankful that we don't have to do 2 losses like I thought. I don't remember another game until Green Bay. I remember a lot of games from this season, but the next few slip my memory.
See, I remember this Pittsburgh game, and I think this Pittsburgh game is where the groundswell and Jim Schwartz really comes under fire for some of what he did in this game. Huh. I'm hoping I can find my old notes on this game because I used to take really detailed notes. I don't take as detailed of notes anymore.
Detailed notes when watching random football games back in 2013?
Yeah, well, I was doing the podcast back then, I'm pretty sure. I was doing something back then where I had to take notes. And I remember watching this game because I was so pissed off after this game. Because this was a game I felt they should have won. If it's the game I remember. And I took notes upon notes upon notes, like legal pad size notes, like 5 pages worth.
I hope you find it. We'll get into those games next week again. A win against Chicago 21-19, a loss at Pittsburgh 37-27. That's going to do it. This is the Practice Squad presents Throwback.